Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Make sure I have the screen ready. Screen share ready. Here we are in V'zot haBracha. And we've gotten this far, as far as verse 8, but that's because there's so much commentary on that. So we're on to Levi. We've had Reuven and we've had Judah, and by implication, we've had Shimon. So we're now on to Levi. Ule Levi Amar, and to Levi he said. However, you'll see that Rashi translates this a little bit differently. Tumecha ve'urecha, your tumim and your urim. And these were oracles, okay, and there's some discussion in the rabbinic material exactly what were these. There are opinions. As far as I know, there are maybe two basic opinions. One is that they were, by the way, the reason they were called Urim and Tumim, interesting, he reverses it here. Urim because they shed light on the future, as oracles do, and Tumim because they were perfect. They gave you a full prediction as to what the future was going to be. The high priest, according to one opinion, the high priest would put these stones into his breastplate. They remember it was folded up, a piece of cloth folded up, and so it made a pocket, and he put it in the pocket of that breastplate. There is another opinion that basically says that when you take all the tribes that are listed on those 12 stones, that you take the letters of those tribes. I think there is a letter missing, maybe I'm not sure, maybe a samach that's missing, but that they would light up, and that the high priest knew the secret of how to read from those stones lighting up and certain letters, and he was able to then cast this oracle based on that. So at any rate, that's what this tumecha and urecha refers to. Leish chasidecha, to your faithful person, or faithful man, asher nisito, okay, whom you tested, in that you tested him b'masa, and you're going to see this is why Rashi is going to translate this in the way he does. You tested him at masa, uterivehu al mei meriva, and let's see. Again, it would have to be some kind of parallel, right? Although this terivehu is an interesting word because it sounds like you quarreled with him, something like that, okay? Because a riv is a quarrel on the waters of Merivah. And again, this is what causes Rashi to give his davar acher in that he will give. So you can understand nisito, to test, and terivehu can also mean sort of something like you saw whether he would be loyal, you saw whether he'd be loyal with you. So obviously, we'll go to the Rashi right away, but you'll see. He says it right, I believe, right at the beginning. Well, sort of at the beginning. Ula Levi Amar. So it says, and to Levi he said, but it isn't. Rashi understands the Levi, which generally means to. It means al Levi Amar. In other words, he said this about Levi, because if you notice that the second person in that sentence is actually referring to God, it isn't referring to Levi. So that's why Rashi is understanding this Ula Levi as meaning regarding Levi, he said. Here we go. Tumecha ve'urecha, and this is where, so your tumim and your urim, he says, kalapei shchina hu medaber. Moses is addressing God in this sentence. Lauren, do you have anything different in your translation? I want to make sure I'm being accurate here. Does it sound close enough?
I mean, yeah, no, mine's the same. I mean, it says Shekhinah, and you said God, but it says Shekhinah in the
Yeah, it's in
Rashi too. So
divine, right? It means the divine.
Yeah. Right.
The divine presence. Okay. Asher nisi to b'masa. Here we go. You tested him at Masa. What was the test? Shelo hitlonanu im sha'ar hamalinim. In that they didn't complain with the other people who complained, that when they got to Masa, they lacked, I think, some water there, and they started to complain immediately. And apparently the Levites did not complain amongst the other Israelites. Terivehu, and again, Rashi is clearly indicating this complexity of this word that I pointed out before, right? And he says ketargumor. So let's take a look at the Targum. He says that the Onkelos does a good job here. And you'll see that Onkelos takes some license because he doesn't translate it word for word here. But here, di nasitohi, whom you tested him, the niseta, and with niseta could simply mean with tests, okay? Vahava shalim, and he was wholehearted, bechanotohi almei mitzuta, when you encamped him by the waters of quarreling. Ve'ishtekach meheman, and he was found to be faithful. So that's how how Onkelos understands the Hebrew there, and how he works with the Hebrew, and perhaps provides in more interpretation than translation right there. But Rashi is not completely satisfied with Onkelos there, and you see that he goes on. And here it is, Davar Acher, another interpretation, and this is how he understands that word in the meaning of, you quarreled with him, sorry, I'm struggling here, contended with him, right? So again, speaking to God, right? You contended.
I have challenged.
Okay, thank you. At least I feel that's pretty close, okay? Challenged, contended, right? Almei Merivah, by the waters of Merivah. And the waters of Merivah are where Moses, remember, struck the rock. So, nistakafta lo, you turned against him. Lavo ba'alila, this is referring now to Aaron, right? You turned against him to come with a pretext, And here's the point. Moshe amar shim'una hamorim, if in fact Moses said, listen, you rebels, right? So in other words, did Moses deserve to die in the wilderness and not enter the promised land because he addressed as leader, he addressed his group as a bunch of rebels? So, okay. But what about Aaron and Miriam? Me'asu. But what did Aaron and Miriam do? So in a sense, there was a pretext, using Moses as the pretext to quote, punish Aaron and Miriam with the same fate, that they would not enter the promised land. So this is obviously a very deep issue, right? I mean, and very, very poignant about, there's something quite dramatic and touching about the fact that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, all of whom were very involved in getting the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, leading them through the desert for 40 years. I mean, ask yourselves, what kind of task was that? It was amazing, the amount of personal sacrifice and devotion that they had to have. And he makes this one mistake and boom, look what happens. And I wonder to myself, maybe it's simply a function of age, but I am understanding the issue of immortality as becoming a far greater issue, which we tend to overlook or even deny. And I want to try and Bli Nader to write a piece about Psalm 27, which I am pretty certain has to do with immortality. That those references to the house of the Lord, God's presence, etc., and the reason why the enemies cannot touch me is because ultimately, guess what? They're going to perish along with me. But the difference is that, please God, what I'm yearning for is that I live beyond this life. And the idea that life is not fulfilled in this particular dimension, and that is possibly a theme that is actually behind the fact that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam don't enter the land of Israel. They don't enter the promised land. It's a theory.
Can I ask
Yeah.
to go back to the Rashi there?
Please.
I didn't understand. Let's see, where were we?
Nistakafta?
The Devar Acher.
Yes, right.
Who Herivehu? Who did that?
So he's addressing God, remember, and he says, Lord, you contended with him, with Aaron.
Levi?
Yes, well, with Aaron
With
specifically.
Aaron, okay.
Yes.
But then,
Almei Merivah, at the waters of Merivah.
okay.
And then Nistakafta, you turned against him. Nistakafta lo. So I looked this word up in Jastro, and it's one of it actually has the whole idea of creating a pretext. Again,
So the idea is Moshe is saying to God, you created a pretext against
Yes.
Levi, against
Aaron and Miriam. By the way, look here how Miriam is included in this incident.
So mine says, and instead of pretext, it says false accusation, but that's
Okay.
similar. So it
Yes,
says,
it really
but it
is.
says against him Levi. So it says, mine says you made false accusations against him, in parentheses Levi. For if Moses, and then here's more parentheses, was punished with death and not permitted to enter the land of Israel because he said to Israel, listen now, you rebels, then how do we understand why Aaron and Miriam were also punished with death?
Correct.
And were not permitted to enter the land of Israel? What did they do to deserve this?
Right.
But
That's
it still
the point
says when the accusations were against Levi.
I understand, but it doesn't. What Levi? What Levi?
Well, I don't know.
Levi, the person.
But Levi, the person, never. That wasn't a pretext against Levi, the person. Levi, the person was. Why would Aaron and Miriam come into this? He's simply using Levi because both Aaron and Miriam were Levites. Okay, but it wasn't against the tribe of Levi per se, unless.
No, but when it says early in verse 8.
Yes.
And of Levi, he said, so he's talking about Levi, whether Levi's representing more than just Levi, but then in my translation of the Rashi, it says specifically the false accusation was against Levi, the person. It says him.
I think but he says ish chasidecha, right? Your faithful person. And that's referring here to Aaron. And that's why, because Aaron was the one who had the Urim and the Tumim. No one else from Levi had that. And do not worry, he hasn't finished with Levi yet. But here because of the relationship Aaron and the position of leadership that Aaron and Miriam had, and they were all Levites, it's significant and it reflects on the tribe. But no, I wouldn't take the Levi there. It's fine. I'm
not arguing Chabad's point. I'm just pointing out that it's different.
I feel that the translation, and believe me, I think that I have a tremendous amount of respect for the scholarship of the people who wrote that translation as opposed to my own scholarship. But I would say that it's ambiguous, and he's really talking about Aaron. He's talking about Aaron and Miriam. And he says it explicitly later on. And because they were Levites. So in that sense, the whole tribe is affected by them. But we are going to go on. And now in verse 9, he is definitely speaking about the tribe now. He's referring to the tribe in verse 9. I hope you're comfortable. I mean, I'm very comfortable.
I'm still a little confused, but
okay, go on.
Maybe if we go on, it'll get
it's okay. Clear. We're not going to comment about this anymore. So please, let me know what's the confusion.
Well, the confusion, I guess, is the idea is that so this Devar Acher is saying that God had made a pretext, made up a reason when there
Yes.
really was no reason for Aaron and Miriam to
That's
die
what he's saying.
outside
That's
the
what
land
he's
of
saying.
Israel?
Right. And that's how
Okay.
he's dealing with the Teri Vehu, because normally Teri Vehu is going to be a quarrel, right? Waters of Meriva. And so he is saying that God found a pretext. And that's why I gave that explanation of saying that while we look at it as something terrible, okay, nevertheless, the Torah might be trying to tell us not to be overly concerned, that the Torah really wants us to understand, because my sense of it is that traditionally, that Judaism essentially is offering us an opportunity to gain immortality through our closeness to the divine origin and divine source of all life. Because again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but considering, understanding what it is to believe in a divine source, and that's because we really can't explain consciousness or the beginning of life. Even, we can't really explain how consciousness comes into life. And so there's a sense of transcendence, and that the Torah wants us to understand, even though it doesn't want to say it necessarily explicitly, except possibly in Daniel at that last chapter, which talks about resurrection. But here it's talking Olam Haba. And in his Hilchot Tshuva, I think it's chapter 8 of Hilchot Tshuva, Maimonides speaks specifically about the Olam Haba as being what we sometimes refer to as the world of souls. And that in this drama, the Torah is trying to explain that to us. So if
In this pasuk here, I mean, in this Rashi,
I'm
that I don't see any reference to that here. I
No,
just see
there is none. No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
There is. I'm simply saying that the whole issue of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam not being allowed to actually go into the land of Israel is part of saying to us, well, if Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, who were such incredible human beings, were not allowed to go into that, and we believe in a kind, ki l'olam chasdo, right? We believe in a kind, wonderful, loving God.
and just. I mean, that to me, the problem here is about justice, because
absolutely.
pretext implies that an injustice has been done.
Okay.
Well, I don't
Only in
understand.
that context. Only in that context.
Is it Moses that's alleging that God used a false pretext, or is it being alleged other than Moses complaining to God in person?
Okay, again, I don't know that he's complaining. I think he's simply saying that in that particular case, there was no reason to punish Aaron and Miriam, that Moses himself realized he'd committed the error, but it was in a sense now asking why Aaron and Miriam. And I'm trying to explain, Sherbeth, all I'm trying to do is try to explain why it's not necessarily divine injustice. Okay, we don't understand it fully. It could have been actually a divine kindness, and yet nevertheless was based on a pretext. So how we choose to look at it.
Well, I don't know. I don't think they certainly didn't want to die outside the land of Israel. That we can assume.
No, you wouldn't want to. That's true.
My question was, is it objectively being considered a pretext, or was that Moses's accusation that it's a pretext?
Moses is the one who's saying it, but I think Rashi is explaining it as saying, indeed, it was, we don't have a better reason right now. Okay. Do you know of any sin Miriam committed or Aaron?
No, but when we start,
Aaron, you could say that the golden calf, but no.
At the beginning of the verse, when we start with Lo Levi Amar,
yes,
the natural question is, has there been some kind of reconciliation of Levi with God? Because, back at the end of Sefer Breshit, the tribe of Levi, or the son Levi, was in hot water. He had done something terrible.
Right.
And I just wonder, has anybody come out with a explanation of how Levi went from being in the doghouse to being the great leaders and the priests?
Okay, so I can certainly address that. I'm happy to. Remember, Levi was in cahoots with Shimon, And what I think the great message that the Torah is giving us there is that sometimes a specific action, okay, depending on subsequent events, can be interpreted based on that. So Levi is, remember, Levi is going to be scattered in Israel. Levi doesn't get a holding in the land of Israel. He only gets cities, but he doesn't get he doesn't get the apportionment that all the other tribes got. Okay, so
And he's the only one who stood up at the golden calf.
Well, yes,
They
he
are
is.
the only ones who stood up.
Again, we haven't finished. We haven't finished with Levi.
Right.
We haven't finished with them. So that subsequent events, and again, remember the importance of tshuva, right? Tshuva was so important that it had to be created even before the world was created. Levi does tshuva. Shimon doesn't do tshuva. They both committed the same act, but tshuva is so powerful. Remember, and I'm sure, Shira Beth, I'm sure you're familiar with statements that say people who do tshuva are even higher than tzaddikim gemurim, than people who are perfect tzaddiks.
What was his tshuva though? I don't remember what exactly his tshuva was.
Well, I'm not, right now I can't think specifically of it, okay, but it could be that I'm not sure. I think it may have to do with Moses and what Moses did in terms of, remember how he saved Miriam, how it's not Miriam, I'm sorry, Tzipporah, right, when he went, and the fact that he strove for justice, etc., etc. It may have something to do with that. That he was willing to take on himself ultimately, despite the fact that he was resisting it initially, bringing the children of Israel out of slavery. I'm on my feet on regel achat. I'm on one leg, trying to answer a very good question. But there must have been some sense, and I suspect we could find it. And I'm giving you some examples. Okay, but what apparently Levi did in fact do tshuva. He still was, in a sense, quote, punished in that he never got a holding, with the rest of the tribes. And so he never had the opportunity to prosper like the other tribes based on real estate. So, but on the other hand, that instead of being something negative, it turned out to be something very positive. So, at least that's I think how one would look at the general narrative and what happens and the irony of what happens to Shimon as opposed to Levi. Let's see. Do we want to pursue this a little further, or you want me to take one more verse?
Well, I wanted to say about Miriam.
Yes, please.
Well, when Moses prayed for her, it's because she had been given leprosy.
Yes.
And that was a punishment.
Yes, it was.
So you said, what did she do wrong?
Right.
I think you have to go there.
She was already punished for that.
That's the point, Lauren. I was going to respond the same way.
And Aaron had been punished for some of his sins also.
Oh, he did. He lost 2 children.
Yeah.
That's a pretty tough punishment. He lost 2 of his sons. And it is stated elsewhere that was because of the golden calf incident. No, he pays for it. But again, think about this. The whole issue of tshuva and how foundational that is. And how important it is, because it means essentially that even though we are not perfect, and we may in fact commit some serious infractions, tshuva gives us that opportunity, nevertheless, to gain immortality. And by the way, when we talk about B'Sefer HaChayim, in the book of life, frankly, it's not talking about living until you're 80 or 90 or whatever. It's talking about immortality. That Yom Kippur, the power of Yom Kippur is that it gives us a huge injection of the possibility of immortality. So I'm not saying you have to agree with me. I'm just saying that that's my sense of where the religion is trying to take us. And what's beautiful about Judaism is that it says we need to earn it. It's not an entitlement.
So I looked up the thing with Levi, It doesn't explain that much, but it says he did teshuvah for the Shechem incident. The Torah, it just says he studied and did atonement.
Yeah, that's must be from rabbinic sources, because it's, they're not giving you a verse where there
No,
might
they're
be a
not.
verse that alludes to it, but not that I'm aware of. We have to assume it on some levels, but then you look at what some of the Levites did. I'm very tempted to at least look at the next sentence, even if we aren't going to get into the Rashis. Look at this. The Rashi keeps going on and on and on. Okay, so here's part of the tshuva. Ha'omer la'aviv u'le'imo, he said to his father and his mother, Lo re'itiv, I did not see him. Okay, or I did not see, could be them. Ve'et echav, his brother, lo hikir, he did not recognize. Ve'et bana, or he didn't show preference to. Ve'et banav lo yada, nor did he know his sons. Ki shamru imratecha, because they guarded your statements, your words. Uvritcha yinsoru. Again, yinsoru, nitzor again means to guard. It's a synonym for shamar, right? And they guarded your covenant. So this now perhaps answers the question, Shirabeth, that you were asking. Okay, and the question that in general we're asking, and clearly there's lots of explaining to do, and please God, we'll have tomorrow in which to look at this and to look at the Rashis and how he explains the meaning of this, because you can't just take it at its basic level. Remember, I want to remind you, initially, every single firstborn Israelite male would have in fact done what Levi ultimately did as a tribe. Every firstborn male, because of God, remember, having to kill the Egyptian firstborn in order to redeem the Jewish people from slavery, the firstborn males would have been, quote, given to God to serve as what Levi did. So that was plan A. And it's very clear in the Torah. I mean, that's pretty explicit in the book of Numbers. And I think we already talked about that. And what happened was, because Levi at Mount Sinai was loyal to God, the only tribe that was loyal to God at the time of the golden calf, that's why this was given to them. So it was a privilege, but ironically also a fulfillment of what Jacob had said to his sons, to Levi and to Shimon, when on his deathbed. So it's sort of all coming together here, and we'll stop here. I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.